Welcome to the Hunt Test Hobo Podcast, your place for truckside chats and insights into the retriever game. Whether you're just getting started or you're a seasoned handler, this podcast is another resource for tips, tricks, and insights from both the amateurs and professional trainers' perspectives. Each week, we'll dive into the nitty-gritty of retriever training, sharing stories of success, overcoming challenges, and forging stronger bonds with our dogs. This is the Hunt Test Hobo Podcast. I'm Chris Rud, your host, fellow retriever enthusiast, and student of the game. Let's dive in. Welcome to another episode of the Hunt Test Hobo Podcast. Today I'm joined by Jim Templeton. He's an Arkansas resident, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But before we jump into it, I hope y'all are staying cool. I think the weather might be finally breaking a little bit. I have had the absolute craziest couple of weeks. I left my job after 13 years at an agency. I left that, and I took 2 weeks off because we were selling our house last Friday, and I never want to move again in my life. It was the worst thing. I planned on taking 2 weeks off, and it was going to be great. And I was going to be able to relax a little bit, be able to edit some courses that we're working on for the Hunt Test Guide. And, of course, winter comes into heat, which means I'm like, oh, great. I'm really excited about it. Well, she comes into heat, and then her puppies are due, I think, day 3 of the Grand. So we're done for that. But I had to drive her down to Mississippi twice, which I think if you listen to the previous episode, you learned that I was with Barton for a couple of days. But 4 days of driving and trying to move my house was an absolute disaster. And then on top of that, our family went up to the UP where we go to every Labor Day. So I literally picked up my check, and it took me forever to drive out of the city. And I'm so glad that I'm moving. But I'm temporarily housed at my parents' house, which is great in and of itself until I close on my new house October 1. So for those of you that are listening, I hope you're all having a great time. But like I said, we have our guest this week, an amateur trainer, Jim Templeton. So Jim, why don't you introduce yourself and kind of tell us how you got into dog training?
Like you said, my name's Jim. I got my first dog probably back in the early 90s and really didn't know what I had then, and ran some AKC tests, but mainly I just wanted a duck dog. I lived down in southeast Arkansas, so I could hunt Mississippi and Arkansas. So instead of having 60 days of hunting season, I had pushing 75 days, which early on in a marriage made my wife extremely happy. She loved that I could hunt as much as I wanted to, and we had a couple of kids that were very young, so it always made for some trying but fun times. Then we lived down there for a while, and then I moved back to Little Rock area. And if you don't hunt in the Stuttgart area, duck hunting, it's more of a job than when I was down in southeast Arkansas. I could literally be anywhere in 20 minutes. So I got out of duck hunting a little bit, grew up deer hunting, got back into that. And then I guess I started duck hunting again in the mid-2000s, and I decided I wanted to get another dog. So I got a dog from Web-Footed Kennels, and she had a lot of go. I just wanted a duck dog, but ended up getting involved with Pin Oak Retriever Club. And so I was like, you know what, I'm going to run tests. Between the 90s and the late 2000s, the information that you could get for training a dog was vastly different. And so I followed Freddie's videos. Mm-hmm. The only bad thing about that, and I've given him a hard time about that, is you just think that your dog should go as fast as his dogs. And so there was a lot of stuff that I skipped. She wanted to go. I wanted to shoot triples. I wanted a dog that, could do all this stuff. So I went as fast as I could. And we just kind of hit a wall where she couldn't run tests because she was just too amped at the line. In that time period, I met some guys.
Very common story, isn't it?
Yes. I think a lot of people, they want that and they want to be good at it. It's just not understanding that to be good at it, the front, the first part of training a dog has to be really slow.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can go really fast at the end, where a lot of us, I think as novices and amateurs, we try to go really fast at the beginning, and then we find all the holes, and then we try to slow down, and you can't do it.
Yeah.
It's just, they've gotten away with doing it the wrong way. Trying to reteach it sometimes is just too hard. But, within all that, my kids grew up. We were always a competitive family. And, this just kind of took me to where, hey, I like the hunt test game. I'd always played golf. And it was like I can kind of transition and still do some of the stuff that I want to do and have some fun, but I just didn't have the bullet that I could go do it with. So I'd been training with a couple of pros, and one of them, when I told him I was ready for another dog, he said, he goes, I'll help you. I was like, perfect. So I started sending him all these pedigrees. I mean, it was just like one after another. Every time I saw one, I'd send it. And so he finally was like, do not ever send me a pedigree again. I will find a dog for you. And so he found this litter that Ice was out of. Kevin Jackson was the breeder. Chris and Brett had trained both of Kevin's dogs that Ice was out of, a dog named Jill and a dog named Joe. Both grand champions, both pedigrees were extremely strong. And so I met Kevin one day and picked my dog, and I knew that, hey, I wanted a dog that I could hopefully go run the grand with. That was the whole deal. I wanted a duck dog, which Pippin, my other one, she's a great hunter. The test just blew her mind. So that just kind of began the journey with Ice. We picked him, and from the start, I'd been gathering information and just decided, hey, this is how I'm going to build him. And we've had a lot of luck with him.
So why did they not want you to send pedigrees? I'm just curious.
Well, because everything I would send would be real heavy on the sire side and weak on the female side.
Yeah.
And so it was the novice in me that didn't understand how to really read a pedigree. And then it was also hey, what are you looking for long term? I'll go back. You made a comment, I think, in your last podcast about liking to breed an FC, AFC to a grand dog. And I think that's a really good deal, especially if that grand dog has a strong pedigree throughout with maybe several grand champions and maybe backed up with several FC, AFCs. Personally, I like the grand to grand that's got both grand and FCs all mixed in the pedigree. But I think everybody kind of leans toward different things, and what you want, what games you want to play comes into play with that. If I knew I was just wanting to be a master hunter and a grand champion, that's what I'd want all throughout the pedigree. But I think if you want to play the SRS and maybe dabble in some field trial stuff, you need some field trial stuff in that pedigree.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you said is or what they were saying about the pedigrees you're sending is extremely true. Like, there are more breedings out there than ever right now. And there's just so many junior hunters, senior hunters, bred to, maybe not an FC, but another grand dog. And that's just economics going on. That's not necessarily a great breeding program for Labradors, and I think that what I look first, I don't even to me, if I can find a couple good females that I'm following that I really like, that's what I'm doing. I'm following those. I'm messaging those people. I'm becoming friends with those people, and
right.
I'm just saying, hey, even if I'm not ready to get a dog, I just always tell them, hey, if you're gonna breed, just shoot me a text. I just want to know about it, and
it's funny how people kind of gravitate toward the sire and what their accomplishments are. And the more I've been involved in this, the more I'm like, if you can get 2 or 3 great qualities out of the sire, the majority is going to come from the dame.
I mean, 100%, I agree with that. And I don't know why that is, but it's totally true.
And I have people all the time ask me what traits does Ice seem to pass along to his puppies, and I think it's the steadiness and of course his line manners, but the way he runs, the lines that he carries, he's kind of passed that on. Well, if they can get that from him and the marking combination from the female and the demeanor they like out of the female, they're probably going to end up with a pretty decent dog. But I'm a firm believer you got to like that female as much as a male to enjoy the puppy.
Yeah. And just for the people that are listening, like when I was deciding on the litter for winter, I mean, I really like Stroker. Like I followed, he was famous to me, right?
He's famous to all of us. I mean, yeah, I watched him at Pepper's SRS and was like, this dog is impressive.
Yeah. Yeah. And so like, but I still did the right things. I called Clark when I finally, talked to him and we had a conversation. I said, well, what has he been paired with that's been really, really good? And he said, you need a really hot female.
Yeah.
With, a really, really exceptional marking. And I was like, well, that fits the bill. Like that is exactly who my dog is. And it made me feel really good because I let Clark run her for about 2 months and then run her in a spring grand. And he's like, this dog is exactly what you want to be bred to Stroker. And I think it really did. It's turning out great. Like I really like Fang, Clark's dog that I'm working with right now. But I just, for all that are listening, the female is the thing that really matters. So look hard for a good female, and then they'll typically be bred to a really good sire anyway. So
when you start, and it goes back to, you hear people on the podcast all the time talk about spend as much as you can afford on a puppy.
Yep.
Because that is your frontline investment. And the more you invest there, the less you'll invest on the backside, whether you're going to have it pro trained or whether you're going to train it yourself. If you've got a dog that has proven genetically everything above it can learn, then there's a good chance your dog can learn and probably, for most of Sam's, overcome our shortfalls.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, there's $1,500 puppies out there all over the place. But if you can afford to spend the extra $500, you're probably going to be extremely happy.
100%. Well, let's talk a little bit about Ice. So we started to talk about that, then we went on a very nice little segue there about breeding and picking a dog and all that good stuff. And so, the reason that you like grand breeding is because you like to see that they're proven to be more composed on both sides, or like what's your reasoning for that?
That's what you hope. I laugh all the time because Kevin would tell you Jill is really hot. She moves at the line. I've seen her run as test dog, and she's not what I would call the picture perfect set still, don't move dog. But she's probably, I think Chris and Brett would probably tell you that she's probably one of the best marking dogs they've ever had at Web-Footed Kennel. And then Joe, he is out of Ranger, but he is rock. I mean, he's real steady, runs great lines, and so their pairing was really good. It just so happened that Kevin owned both of them,
which so normally is kind of a red flag.
Yes. Normally you would be like, this guy's just trying to make money, But you were looking at two dogs that had grand titles, two dogs that were bred extremely well. Knowing Kevin, he's not a guy that was breeding for money. He's a guy that breeds for genetics and wants it to be passed on.
Yeah, he wants to train it probably, right? Like that's what I look for too. That's another good tip. Like when you see pros that are putting together breedings of dogs inside their truck, typically that's going to be a good one because they know they're going to get stuck with a lot of them.
Yes. And that's a good business model for them. If they've got, some good dogs that they can breed together and then be part of the sale, then they can also sell their business to where they can get some of those back. So that's always been kind of a neat thing. The more I'm involved in the breeding, the more I'm around things like that. That's stuff you really look for. And so
In Ranger, that's Charlie Hines' Ranger,
Yes,
the Hall of Fame dog.
out of Tiger.
That dog is has thrown a lot of good dogs from I'm just looking at the records, and a few people that I know really like Ranger.
Yep.
And so if you see a one that's out of Ranger and the female's equally good, that sometimes I get it's amazing how many texts I get about, what do you think of this sire? What do you think of this dog? I'm like, I don't know. Like,
Look,
I know a few, but I'm not an expert. But anyway,
I'm one of those guys that if you can find a dog that is second or third generation out of Tiger, you've probably got a good chance of having a good dog.
Yeah.
And especially if it's in the top and bottom, then that's something that you ought to just kind of have a light on going, hey, that dog is pretty impressive. I mean,
that's Tiger McBun,
barring injury, he might have been one of the better dogs to ever.
He came out of that McBun breeding, right? Is that?
Yep.
Yeah. That breeding produced how many? It was crazy how many FCs that breeding produced.
Yep. So
somebody told me once that was like the greatest field trial breeding of all time or something, but who knows what that actually means? It could be though. Looking at it,
what's strange is the greatest field trial breeding back then versus now. Just what they ran then and what they're running now is just amazing.
Yeah.
Just the difficulty.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. You forget what we're asking these dogs to do, and we had a long drive driving home from the UP this weekend, and my wife is like, "So why does water matter so much?" And I was like, "Oh, I get to tell you, my entire training life right now."
How much time do we have?
and I explained it very simply. I said, well, dogs have to make decisions en route to go find a bird, because if they don't find a bird if they don't go straight, they'll inevitably get lost. I've said that 100 times on the podcast. And I said, so when we see these big ponds that don't have anything in them and then just swimming straight across, I said, that's just a lot of time being burned. And I said, all tech water is creating a lot of little decision points that you can utilize. And she's like, oh, I get it. I was like, well, do you want to go train? She's like, no. I'm like, I thought I had it in, but I don't remember why I even said that. But
well, I kind of started the journey with Pippin, my female, because my wife, we'd been following my son playing baseball and golf all over the place. She'd been taking pictures, and so she was like, yes, I'm all in on the Hunt Test. Well, now I can't. She wouldn't go to a Hunt Test now if I paid her. Cause I guess I'd burn her out, and she'd taking pictures, and she was taking pictures for everybody. But she's just, it's kind of that same thing. It's like, hey, you want to go do this? No, I'm good. I'll stay at home this weekend.
Yeah. Well, we did one day of started for my daughter, and we took the whole family, the whole deal. And I'll tell you what, that is a completely different look at a hunt test when you're not running it and you got your whole family there. There's mosquitoes, it's hot, and you're just like, oh my gosh, can we just run and get out of here? I was like, I mean, don't get me wrong. It's at Whistle. They're amazing people. It was a great event. And the only thing that the dog failed at, or the only person that failed, was me, because I didn't air the dog well enough because we were kind of in a rush. And he brought back that second bird, and man, he just let it loose right on the mat.
Nice.
And it was one of those deals where you had to walk really far to get to the line. And I was like, I don't have anything. I had to run back to the truck. And so and it was 100 degrees. So I'm running, and all the judges know me. They're all good friends of mine. And they just were videotaping me picking this up, and they're like, "We're gonna post it on the podcast."
There you go.
I was like,
nothing like having friends.
I was like, it just happens sometimes, And it was, the best part is my first strategy was I'll just kick it into the water with my crock, and it was a little too mushy to kick into the. So I'm running, and my inside of my crock is just I know what's in there. I'm just like, this is the worst. And anyway, I had to go find a pros truck with a big water tank and just get in and out of there. I was like, do I tell my wife that I did this? Will she think it's funny, or is she gonna be like, you're disgusting? Anyway, it was a great time. My daughter had an awesome time. She got a ribbon, and that's
awesome getting her involved.
Yeah, he got a ribbon above her bed, so she's pretty excited. And right afterwards, she went over and we watched season. She's like, I think I could do that. I was like,
there you go.
You can't even blow a whistle yet. You saw that part, right? She's like, yeah, but I've casted dogs. I was like, okay, we can work on it next year, but you're not quite ready for season yet.
Hey, at that age, you just get them in with the AKC side so they don't have to use a gun.
Yep.
It'd be perfect.
I think we're gonna do that because I only have one. I'm 1-for-1 with Winter and Master. I haven't actually done any of that yet, so that would probably be something that we do this summer because then she can go to run junior or senior or whatever,
Yep.
and we'll have a good time. So
just double stake her.
We got a little sidetracked again.
Okay.
Tell us everybody about Ice.
Well, when I picked him, Kevin had brought down all the males, and he was pushing me toward this one, and I was like, you know what? He's kind of the bull of the woods and the one that's got the most aggression, and and I was like, I want that one over there that's just apart, doesn't want anything to do with the other dogs, because of the female I've got right now. I want something with a different demeanor. And he said, are you sure? Are you sure? And I was like, yeah. And so he ended up keeping the one that he was going to try, that he wanted me to buy. And the dog's name is Dewey, and he's got 3 grand passes, and I think 1 or 2 plates right now. So, I mean, he's been successful as well. But with Ice, we just got him home, and, from the start, I've been talking to a lot of different people that had successful dogs that were amateurs and pros, and just asking, really probing, how you built your dog, how you did this and how you did that. And so I just told myself that I am not going to limit myself to training one way with my dog. I'm going to train the way that works best for him. And so that's kind of what we did from the start. I used a Bill Hillman puppy video. I had gone to a Pinnock at a Robert Milner seminar. He came and talked to us. And so for one full day, he talked about British and American labs and how our hunt tests were horrible and their hunt tests were great, and that American labs were too hot and British labs were just perfect. And then the next day he talked about training, and it was awesome. So the first day was a long day that sucked. And the second day he really got down to, hey, just some basic training that was really reward based. And so a lot of people will say treat based. But his deal was you start with treats, you move to bumpers, you move to birds. And so the dog's always getting what it wants. And so I used part of his, some Bill Hillman, some Freddie King, some Cody Springer, some Dickie Edmond, who owns Chaos, and some Larry McMurray, who, has probably got more grand passes than any other amateur around, and just kind of combined some stuff and asked a lot of questions and started working with Ice. And it seemed to work. Something didn't work the way I thought it should, or he had a hard time understanding. I went to a different way to teach it. So,
because you understood the why behind the method, probably, right?
Yes, and I was in no hurry to get to finish, to get to the grand, and that was my goal, the grand and a master hunter. And so everything we did was, hey, really just to teach. And so I would, people look back and be like, well, you passed the grand at 19 months old. You must have. I was like, really? I went slow. But going slow, I think part of it taught him how to learn when he was little. And I think that's just like a kid. I think the smarter kids, their parents do a good job of teaching them how to learn when they're young. My kids did it. I don't know what, my wife's a teacher, so she was able to, they sure didn't get it from me. But that was just something I did with Ice. It was like, hey, I'm going to teach him to learn when he's little. And the older he got, just a little more repetition, he could figure everything out. Didn't have to use a lot of collar pressure. Collar pressure is always good for him, but sometimes just a stern no does more for him than correcting him with the collar.
Absolutely. So your journey, you mentioned the 19 months old when he got his first grand pass. Now he's got 7, is that right? He's
got 7. He failed the second one he ran. We made it to the 5th series on 2s, and I did not prep properly for the upland, and so he crept out on a walk up.
Oh,
Um, and yeah, so
that's heartbreaking.
that was heartbreaking. And so since that time, he's gone 6 for 6.
Very cool.
Um, and he's was 3 for 3 in the Master National. Um, and that was great. I'm glad I've got the 3 plates, but I'll probably not ever chase that journey again. I think I would rather do more qualifiers and get involved in the SRS quicker
Yeah.
in the future.
So there's so much I want to talk about. I want to talk about Pin Oak. I want to talk about Pepper's Pond because I know you train there. Based on what I
Yep.
see you posting all the time, you train at Pepper's Pond all the time. But before we do that, so let's just kind of finish with some of the cool things that ICE has accomplished. I know this weekend you had a big weekend, but even before that, he has an SRS title, right? Amateur SRS title.
Yes. We So because of Dickie and Larry, they really pushed me early on because we trained a lot together. Once he got going and, just because their experience, they were like, hey, you need to run. You need to run him in this. You need to run him in this, especially ours because it's in your backyard, blah, 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 blah. And so after, I think he was 3, after the spring grand, we ran at in Texas at Keith Hall's place, Red River. And it was the first one I ran, and we got a 5th place, I think. Yeah, 5th place. And then we ran Peppers and got a 1st place. And then I needed a 3rd place or better to title him. And so I went and ran at Tyler's place, and we got 4th.
Nice.
So
You had to
I
wait
was
a
just
year.
like so close. And I knew I wasn't running the Crown that year because, you had, no, I said I was going to run the Crown. And so we ran the Crown that year. He went to the Grand, he went to the Master National. I got him on a Friday and trained one day, and we went to Shreveport and made it to the semifinals. And I think most of that was just on his talent because, we didn't have time to do much white coat stuff. We didn't have a lot of time to get back on the page together. So I was extremely happy with that.
Yeah.
Well, then the next year I went and ran at Valenciana, the first SRS event that we could get to, and he got a 3rd place, so we titled. And then I ran 4 SRS events that second year, but didn't run the Crown because I just didn't feel like it was fair to him to go run the Grand and the Master National with a different handler, me get him and only have 3 or 4 days and try to go compete at the Crown.
Yeah. That's a lot.
And so he got his 3rd pass, and I said, we're done with the Master National, and so now it's just really SRS, Grands, and I'm going to try my luck into some field trial stuff to see if he can do it or not.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about that field trial journey. Like, how many have you ran before this weekend?
1.
Yeah.
So I at a couple of the SRS events, a guy named a couple of pros that were field trialers. Mark Miles was judging, and there was another local guy that ran a lot of Qs, Cody Reynolds. They had both been telling me, you need to run him. You need to run him with some Qs. And so I went out and trained with him one day, and he really probably held his own, if not did better than a lot of the dogs on their trucks. So I entered the Central Arkansas qualifier, and it was the weekend after I got his SRS title. And so we ran. It happened to be at Pepper's Pond. They run them all. They run most of them at Freddie King's place now. But man, he just smoked it. And so I was getting my feet wet. There were a couple of pros there that I knew that run them, and they were like, "Hey, he's doing really well. He's doing really well." And then when they announced he had won, so we ran one, won one.
Yeah. Nice.
And I'd been wanting to get more and more involved, but I was also wanting to get better and better at the SRS. Because I think from the time I started 2 years ago running SRS to what it is now, the amateur division is just brutal.
Yeah.
I mean, the competition is so good. So it's kind of hard to, pick a poison of what games you want to play.
Yep.
And be competitive at them. So this was the closest qual that was coming up that I knew I had a chance that I could run, and it happened to be a double. And there was 36 in the first one and 37 in the second one. And we jammed the first one. We were the only AM to make it to the final 11 dogs, and got a third, so close to getting a second for a QA2 title in the second, and we were the only AM out of 8 dogs to make it to the final.
Yeah.
So I didn't feel like he ran as good as what he normally does, because it'd been so hot this week trying to train for it. We just couldn't get a lot of long work in, and for me, it's hard to work on drag back with one dog. So I was out there walking back and forth with a duck, banging it on the ground, trying to make my own drag back. So I'm pouring sweat, and then he gets to run one long mark and a couple of short ones, and it was just difficult. But I'm pleased with what he did. He always seems to be very consistent.
Yep.
So
that's that drag back, man. It can really get you. One of the things I wanted to ask you. Well, I see it pretty common. It seems to me that it's relatively common that dogs that have had success in the hunt test game at shorter distances, that have, I don't know, maybe they seem to do decently well in the Q game, especially in the land setups. I mean, the watermark sometimes can really be if you haven't exposed them to making those decisions at much greater distances, that can definitely be a pretty significant step up between running grands and master to running a Q that's maybe not just an owner handler. But why do you think that is, that the hunt test dogs a lot of times show up and just do a great job compared to dogs that have been doing white coat setups their whole life?
I think the retired gunner is not that big of a deal to a hunt test dog, because a lot of times they're trying to find that gun without any sound out in the field. And so, the boom cannon or the field shot out there helps them. I believe that a couple of things, that I didn't expose Ice to white coats until he was probably 2.5 years old. And it might have been later than that, but we were always throwing long marks, because he loves to go long. And I think the dogs that can be successful in running Qs and running the SRS that are hunt test dogs, if they are willing to look out and then go out, I think they have a really good chance against the field trial dogs and the SRS. I think a lot of hunt test dogs, because they're never exposed to anything long, they're, and I don't mean this in a bad way, they kind of cower away from looking out and then having to go out real long.
Mm-hmm.
They get accustomed to that 150, 180 mark on land. And so they're never really pushed to go 300 or 350. And so a lot of times, I mean, I was throwing marks 250, 280, with a winger behind a hide with no sound.
Yeah.
So it was, he would look out there and find it.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why a lot of hunt test dogs can have that opportunity to do well in SRS events and quals. And I mean, I'm by no means understand the whole field trial game, because I'm trying to figure it out. Yeah. I want to run him and some all age amateur stuff coming up. It's just there was nothing close.
Yep.
Right now. That's a bad thing about Arkansas. Once it gets warm, everything is 7-8 hours away.
Yep. The only thing I'll add to it, and I'm as you said, I'm not an expert in it. I think that hunt, because like it appears to me that it could be that a lot of field trialers are moving to too hard of marks too early with
I would
dogs,
agree.
and they're using the gun as a crutch, or they're using all those other indicators that I think it's good for a dog to learn. Like, I like that. I kind of did the same thing. It wasn't until winter was almost 3 that I started really pushing white coat setups, because marking with your eyes, looking where that bird is, and that being the first thing that you're looking at, I think is a good thing to teach the dogs. So if you got puppies out there, I encourage you to throw the birds really long, not distance from the dog, but distance from you,
Well,
and teach them to go ahead.
Yeah, I think one of the things too, and this is something I did with ice, and I'll do it with my next one as well. I threw marks at 50 yards in light cover, white bumpers, and I wanted him to drive directly to it. No hunt.
Yep.
Boom, you drive right to it. And I would throw, if he struggled, if he hunted the first one, I would just throw the same mark again. I wanted him to watch it with his eyes and go pin it. And then
Yep.
we went to 75 yards, and then we went to 100 yards. We went out, I think the longest one I threw at that time was probably around 200 yards. And it would start having some factors in it where he was going over little mounds or driving through a little bit covered, but it was, you run a straight line to that mark. And then we taught him to hunt with birds. And so I think that helps. It was a drawback at one time too with him though, because he was so confident and arrogant in his marking and his lines that if he got pushed off, he just held that line and would run past the mark.
Yeah.
And so then we had to teach him to really come back and hunt short.
Yeah.
But I think it's more important to stand over your dog and help them pinpoint marks when they're young. And then you can add distance very easily from that.
Yep. I 100% agree. I think that I'm trying to navigate. So hopefully I have 2 dogs that are going to be here. Well, I'm going to keep one from this winter later in October 22nd. And then I'm also getting a dog out of Lonnie's Sassy to Grady breeding.
Ooh.
And I'm going to do 2 Derby dogs for the first time. And I'm trying to figure out what my plan is, because I hear like Steven Durrance and Clark, they're all like, well, we start with Derbies and then we back into it. But like in the back of my mind, I'm in the same boat that you are. I'm like, man, but that transition went really easy from Hunt Test to Q's. Like, do I want to do that? And so I'm trying to develop a program, quote unquote, of how I want to handle these 2. I'm going to call them the twins. You know, how are the twins going to be trained to do Derby work? Because I think it would be in all of this. The fun is in discovering the new thing, the new game.
Right.
I ran 1 Derby with my dog Rex when I pushed him really fast to get his HRC title, and I ran him in a Derby at 17 months, and he jammed it. Was the only amateur to make it to the Forest Series, but I knew, I was like, I did not do enough contrary marks. Like everything I was doing with him was so black and white that when he flew through these 2 contrary marks, he did exactly what he was supposed to do from a training perspective. And I was like, man, that's a whole nother game, like a whole nother thing about training that I do think is important for me to learn, like how to navigate the balancing out of black and white marking scenarios to where it's kind of like what you just said. Like in the end, the dog has to mark the bird. The dog has to know where that bird is. It can't just take a straight line. It has to know where it is, and that's where that. How long do you stay in black and white, and then how do you do it? Like that's to me is the new mystery that I'm ready to go try to quote unquote figure out.
I know my next one. I'm going to introduce white coats to teach marking concepts.
Okay.
Because I think. Like I bought your program because I think you need to be a student of the game if you want to be good at the game. And so the more I like to listen to different podcasts. I've got different training videos of different people. And, a lot of that stuff you can kind of combine to what you feel comfortable with. That'll transition into what the dog will feel comfortable with. But I think like your concept chart that you do on marking concepts, I think if you did that with a young dog using white coats, it'd be very black and white. And then you can move to hidden guns and they wouldn't have any problem with it.
Yep.
And so, plus it starts opening them up to looking at a white coat. You don't have to teach that part because they see it early on. So there's some things that I've added to my list of, hey, the next dog, this is things I want to do at this age. And hopefully it'll transition into something similar to what I have now. I hope all the time I'm getting better and better at how to do things.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that concept chart helped you. When I saw your name pop up that you bought the course, I was like, oh no. I'm like, I tried to make it so that everybody would get some insight into how to train as an amateur, but I was like, I wanted to get your course.
I will tell you, and I'm not, just because I'm on here, I'm not plugging it, but I am plugging it for an amateur. You need to look at that. I mean, it's, what was it, 150? It's the best 150 you're going to spend because you're probably going to get.
It's 250.
Okay, 250.
I don't want people to be shocked.
Okay, 250. It's the best money spent because if you go in and you have an opportunity to pick out 3 or 4 things that'll make you and your dog better, it's worth it. Because if I was paying somebody to do that, that would have cost me $850, or $1,000 to have my dog at a trainer to learn what, I learned out of your training videos real quick. You're training with the gun movement. I've done something similar with ice, but I just had my piles out there and I'd move him to the pile and then I'd shuck the gun and send him after that one. Well, I love yours because he gets to see something fly through the air every time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can move him to one spot and I can make him stick there and then throw. And I don't like my dogs to move at the line. I like them basically just to move their head. And so that helps that drill more than anything. So I picked up 3 or 4 things from your video that I've implemented in my training, and that working with the gun is one of them. We do it once a week out in the backyard.
Yeah, I think that if you go to the Hunt Test Guide and you look at my course, I believe that is one of them that we're giving previews to, I think, 3 or 4 videos before, if you want to purchase it. And I think the drag back drill, I think, is one of those that I shared, and then the swinging with the gun. They're both free. So if you're listening to this and you want to learn what that drill is like, you can do it. And that's a perfect example of what you're talking about. Dan Erke taught me the swinging with the gun and throwing the bird thing. That's how he taught swinging with the gun. That's how I originally taught it. Well, then I went and trained with Lyle and Clark, and I saw how they did it, and I was like, well, they're very different. One is Clark's way the dog is moving, and then Dan's way the dog's head is just moving. And there's positives and negatives to both. And like you, I was like, I don't want my dog to move. Like, I just want them to sit. That's simpler for me. It's easier for me to make denials. But I liked the fact that you could point and keep the dog looking at something long. That was the one downfall that I kind of felt that was in Dan's way of doing it, is you really had to provide that immediate reward to the dog for them to learn it. And the problem is that if the winger was delayed, which happens.
Yes, at the brand.
If all these things, they get nervous when they swing their head and the bird doesn't come out. So I was like, how do I make this not nervous? And that's when I started introducing the piles, but it just worked out well. So that was just me stumbling upon 2 different ways of doing it and being like, hey, if I just combine these, because I understand the reasons why each one of these can ladder to the rungs of the ladder, quote, are really close together. It'll be good. And so anyway, I'm glad that was helpful. I sent the video to Lyle and Clark when I first did it, because I had never seen what winter looks like swinging with the gun. And when I did it, I was like, holy cow, that looks really cool. And Lyle's like, we got to start doing it Chris's way. I was like, it's just your way. I'm just doing it a little different, you know.
Yeah,
but
I mean, everything builds off some. I mean, we're all stealing from somebody else.
Yeah.
I mean, that's basically what we're doing. But I mean, if you can steal it and modify it, and you're willing to show it to somebody else, you know, if it helps them, that's what you want to do. You know, I think that's one of the things that we're called to do is, as far as, you know, I want to beat everybody, but I want everybody to be as good as they can be. So if you ever ask me a question, I don't care if we're competing at the SRS, you know, what'd your dog do out there? I was like, hey, you need to watch. I mean, you get over there, you're going to lose them. You know, it doesn't look like it, but you will. You know, I'm just, you know, I want to help because so many people have helped me.
Yeah, I think that's why the game is accelerated so fast, is because we just share knowledge so much, because we've all been in that frustrating point where, you know, I had a call yesterday from a listener that was having problems with the dog bringing the dog's through force fetch. The dog has a great retrieve on land, but the dog would chomp a bumper on the way back in water. And he's like, I don't know what to do about it because I can't get to the dog. Because his correction, which is fine, is a physical correction on the bumper when it's on land, and he can physically get to the dog. He's like, well, what do I do? And the way I've seen Dan do that is just light Nick and just say, here, Nick here, Nick here. So it's indirect pressure. And eventually, but I said, you can't try to solve this in a day. Because they're not, if you murder the dog and give him a stern correction, the dog's going to be like, I don't know what the heck just happened and why. This is one of those, like, you almost have to like call or nag them until they make the association. Oh, whenever I bite a bird, I get like a nick.
I get nicked.
Like, oh, but I was like, it might take you 3 weeks to fix it, but just don't move to birds yet. Because it'll get way worse if you move to birds. So just keep throwing bumpers in the water and eventually you'll do it. And I was like, well, how's the dog's drive? Because that correction has to be balanced, like Nick nagging in a sense. I don't have a better word for it. I just made that up now. And that some pros out there probably like, don't call it nagging. But I don't have a better word for it. But like being that light, consistent correction, like almost like a bark collar would be. If the dog doesn't have enough drive, that could really be problematic. So unless you have something else, I'll end that little tangent.
No, I mean, I like using the Kong and the Momarsh bumpers because I think they don't bite at those as hard.
That is absolutely true. The harder the bumper, the worse what we're talking about gets.
And I think that's the worst thing about the ATVs, and is as they get older, they get harder. And so when the dog's coming back, I don't think they're chomping as much as they're just trying to find a good grip.
Yeah.
But you have to be careful and make sure that when they got a bird, they're not doing the same thing.
Yeah. That's a delicate balance of what is my dog actually thinking right now, and trying to get through.
Is he trying to bite a hole in this thing, or is he just trying to find a good grip?
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting because you notice patterns. Like when I was doing force fetch with Fang, he had a little bit of a chomping problem when he got nervous. And then so you're like, okay, what do you do in this scenario? Do you let it ride? Do you start making corrections for it? And I let it ride for like 2 days, and then I saw it getting worse. I was like, nope, okay, we're actually gonna correct for this now. And within a day and a half, he's like, that doesn't get me anything.
Yep.
And he didn't make any reaction. Just when he's bringing it back, and he would just give a little. It's almost like a regrip.
Right.
It's that mouthy regrip, and I said here, and just light pressure, and it was gone. And that tool's built in there. Like that's if there's ever a place.
I'm that way with a dog that I can't stand a dog that comes back and uses the bathroom.
Yeah.
And so early on, that was the whole deal. You know, it's the same way. You start trying to pee when you're coming back. That's my time. I would start nicking you. No here, no here, no here. And I don't have that problem with ice, but I see it on a lot of males that, you know, on their way back, they want to pee on bush here, bush there. And to me, it's a sign of disrespect. And then it's also a sign that you're probably going to struggle with memory marks in that scenario.
Yep. 100%. That's good. That's really good stuff. The last thing I want to talk about Pepper's Pond a little bit because I've never been there, but I think it's a pretty cool. From what I've heard, it seems like it's a really cool setup and scenario. But I wanted to talk about this on the podcast. This weekend was really cool because, I met a bunch of people at the Whistle Hunt Test. That was the first time I've been to an actual test, like a hunt test. It wasn't like an SRS where I knew most of the people already. And I had so many people come up to me and say, "Hey, thanks for doing the podcast. I've been listening," and it was really cool. But I was like, I'm just recording conversations that I have with people on the phone and just hitting record and then pushing it out there. But it was this weekend was cool because a guy that listens to my podcast in the lab messaged me when he heard that I go up to the UP. Like I have family up there, and it's a pretty big area of Michigan. I mean, it's not like it's, and there's not a lot of people up there. It's pretty rural area, the UP. And I say, well, I'm from, I won't say the name because then you can figure out where we're hunting, and I won't do that. But I said, I just messaged him. I said, my family's from this town. He said, no way, I live there. Like a town of like probably 200 people. Like he lived there, and I was like, well, and we started like messaging. Like he's like, I mostly hunt private, and so I'm like, I'm mostly hunting public. And I said, my best place, you have to walk really far. And he's like, I know exactly where that is. You're hunting there.
Wonderful. Yeah.
And I was like, have you ever? He's like, I hunted there like 2 or 3 times. I was like, I've never seen another soul there. But anyway, I just said, hey, like I'm coming up there this weekend for our big family. We do like a mini family reunion every year over Labor Day. And I just said, hey, I'm going to go teal hunting. And he said, yeah, I'll be there. So we went. And it was a great time. We shot 7 birds, which up there, that's a good day. Yeah. when you shoot 3 to 4 birds each, it's a really good day. But like I said, this path you have to walk like really far. And I have been dragging a kayak, and then you have to paddle like a half a mile. It's
even
not
better.
Half a mile. It's like 30. It's a 30-minute paddle. So it's a decent paddle, right? So it takes a lot of energy to get out there. And the reason nobody hunts it is because of it's atrocious.
It takes that much work.
It's atrocious amount of work to do it. But the hunting's actually really good. It's like it's just off of the big lake up there. So you got birds that are that have to make a choice. They're going to fly over the big lakes, or they're going to follow the land around. So you get a lot of different types of birds there, and so it's pretty cool. But I finally figured out that I had a buddy that bought an electric bike, and I have a friend that is a train welder for BNSF, the railroad. Like he literally just rebuilds trains that gets in wrecks or something. And so he made this trailer that mounts on the back of this e-bike and with the kayak. But here's the thing that's funny about it is you can't go slow because every little bump you hit, that trailer just whips this bike around, this big fat tire bike. So you have to go relatively fast. and so we get done hunting. It was a great trip, and I'm cruising back, and I hit a bump when I was supposed to be turning left, and I hit a bump, and it just was not turning left. So I go flying into this woods, and I go, and when that trailer wheel hits a tree, the entire operation just stops. And so I get thrown over. I do a flip and I land on my back, and I'm like, well, I mean, luckily it was in like a bunch of it was really soft ground. It was like swampy ground. So I was like, okay, well, that's okay. And then I hear somebody else go, do you require assistance, sir? And I look over, and walking the walking path is this couple with their newborn in a stroller, and it's this guy standing there looking at me. I'm like, where the heck did you come from? But it just reminded me of like Lord of the Rings, like Gandalf, the way he said it, Gandalf, do you require assistance, sir? And I was like, oh, I'm good, and I fixed it all and kept on going. But anyway, I just think that this whole community that's kind of being developed by these podcasts and the dog training, what spurred it is like hearing you talk about how there's so much information out there now. And I think that's why the Super Retriever Series amateur is getting so hard because there's no secret. If you put in the work, you can do it.
Right.
But it was really cool trip to actually randomly meet somebody because, we're just sitting here talking and having a good time, and people are listening and responding. And it was a great experience to go hunting with somebody I didn't know. So Jake, it was fun, man. Hope you're listening to this one too.
It's always fun. I mean, meet new people. I'm in sales, and so I enjoy that, and that's what's good about the Hunt Test community. where, people are really tight knit about their duck hunting in the hunt test world, by and large, most people are extremely friendly and there to help you.
Yeah. So tell me about Pepper's Pond. So I've heard a little bit, but it seems like the greatest little thing in the world, but maybe it's not, but it seems like it is to me.
It really, for most of us, it's a great place. It was kind of the brainchild of Larry McMurray. It was named after his dog Peppers, who is a 10-time grand champion. But it started off, they built a tech pond on the east, and it's really nice. Lots of points, lots of tees. It's pretty busy, and it's all about maybe waist deep. One end of it's a little shallow, but it's mostly swimming water. And then as the years progressed, they cut out a lot of timber and made a place where you could run land, put a bunch of mounds on it. There's a road that kind of runs through one side of it that now connects to the west ponds. So you got the east ponds started, the west ponds we call them the new ponds. And it's got a little more running water, and then it also has a running water pond. So you can do just about anything you want out there. It's probably 50, I think they said it's 57 acres.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's all public, right?
It's all public, kind of first come, first serve. But most people, like if I'm out there training and, somebody wants to come train, we just kind of join in. I mean, everybody's pretty friendly. Some people are intimidated because you may have, just the guy that's wanting to throw bumpers for his dog. Sometimes they don't understand that, hey, yeah, I'm 100 yards away from the pond, but I'm running all the way across the pond. And so you might have to go over and be like, hey, I'll be done in about 20 minutes.
Yeah.
So sometimes you have to kind of negotiate that, but usually you don't. I mean, usually everybody's pretty easy to get along with. We have a lot of amateur groups that'll train there on Saturday. So I train probably 75% of my time at Peppers. And probably the main reason is it's 15 minutes from the house.
Yeah.
So it makes it real easy.
Man, that's a huge blessing to have something like that at your disposal, man.
Yes. Woo. And I mean, the tech water is really, really good on both ends. Going back to, it's more hunt test tech water than field trial tech water, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah. Makes total sense.
Because you have more running than swimming. And that's the biggest thing that I've noticed is, in the field trial world, there's no running water. It's all who's got the most guts and can swim the furthest.
Yeah.
And so I do on Wednesdays, I run a lot of blinds just to keep him in the water, put him on a point, take him off a point, let him make a decision to get on a point or not to get on that point, in and outs, long entries, with short outs or, short entries with long outs. It's kind of hard to do them both there because they don't really have the way the ponds are designed, but you can get you can do a lot at those ponds. I've got a couple of other places that, I can train. Sean Jackson, he lives about 45 minutes from me. We're doing an SRS this weekend at his place. So we train a lot together. Larry McMurray and John Burchett they built a little training Disneyland on some property, so we train out there as well. And then there's a place in Searcy that I can go train whenever I want to as well. So I've been blessed with getting to know people and having access to some good stuff that you can build a dog on.
Yeah, that's what I've found so much fun at, like, the place that I've been blessed to train at was an hour drive, and I just bought a house that's 25 minutes closer to that place.
Oh, you're gonna love it now.
so I'm like, my wife's like, how much of this is because you want to go to Sharon's? I was like, a decent amount. Like, I'm not gonna lie, honey. Like we wanted to be out in something unincorporated so we could have as many dogs as we wanted and not feel guilty like we're breaking the law or anything. But it was very convenient to pick the house that we did. So It's because access to training grounds, like really grounds make a good retriever for what we're trying to play.
Well, and I mean, like at Pepper's Pond, the Game and Fish does a good job of cutting all the big stuff. I wish they would cut it a little more often than they do, but they've got their routine. But like trimming all around the ponds and, under trees and stuff like that. Pin Oak always has a couple of work days a year. So we have, 10, 12 guys out there, and we weed eat all the ponds. We do all that. We do all the, tight maintenance stuff. And then, if Larry or Sean, if they're doing cleanup, I always want to be involved in that because, I don't have the cost of the land, but I'll be more than happy to put in some sweat equity to be able to use it.
Yeah.
And I think that goes a long way for people.
Yeah. I try to always bring my hedge trimmer every time I go and just trim something every time. And if you do that every time, you can.
Yeah. If you can train for a couple hours and weed eat or trim for 35, 40 minutes afterwards, that goes a long way.
Yep. I just keep picking at it. And then every once in a while, I just jump on her mower and just start going. Put on a good book and just let it roll.
That's what I did at Shine's a couple of weeks ago. I just jumped on the mower and I was like, I'm going to mow half this field, because I knew he was going to come out and do it. And I was like, I've got time after I trained. If I can take out half of it, that's half the time he has to spend on it.
Yep, that's what keeps you invited back, right? So.
Yep.
Well, we just hit our hour mark, Jim. Do you have anything else that I always try to ask amateurs. Excuse me. I always ask amateurs, like, what was something that you learned along the way that you hope that other people can hear from you that would help them be better amateur trainers?
There's probably a couple of things that I try to pass on, and I think sometimes it sinks in and sometimes it just doesn't because of, people they want the gratification and they're not concerned with the journey. Well, be concerned with the journey. Don't be in a hurry. And so that's what I tell everybody is, like, take your time when that dog is young. Make sure that, if you want to run a season test, make sure that you're doing upper level finish stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And, then when you run your finish test, if you're wanting to run the grand, have that expectation that our line manners have to be this is what I expect. And I think you get a lot of that by training with people that have been there and done those kind of things. You can call and ask. I think on Facebook, there's probably a lot of people that you could message and be like, hey, I'd like to talk to you about, this or this. And I think everybody would call you. But my biggest thing is don't be in a hurry.
Yep.
Go slow with your dog when they're young. And then when they get 2 years old and their basics are so good and they're, everything about them strong, you can go. I went to the line 8 times this weekend and he never moved an inch.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to turn around and hopefully go to the line 4 times this weekend and have the same issue. Go slow and then you'll be able to do as much as you want, as fast as you want.
That's good. That's a good one to end on right there. That is super, super key. Well, Jim, appreciate it, man. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for sharing some information, and congrats on all the success that you and Ice have had. And keep posting those training setups. I like to look at them and kind of see what you're doing.
Well, as an AM, I'll tell you, I appreciate everything you're doing for the game. Your podcast, if people will listen to it, they'll take away stuff because of the people that you have on it. They can learn from, and just want to let you know I appreciate what you've done.
Yeah, thanks you. Appreciate it.
All right. See you.